One of our most fundamental needs as human beings is a sense of being connected to others. Even beyond our need for food, water, and shelter, having a deep heart connection with another person is what fulfills one of our deepest needs and makes up much of the sum of life's happiness. There's a crisis of human connection, and it's seen in the millions of precious little faces here in the Philippines and around the world. You see, the Philippines has one of the biggest orphan crises in the world. Every year, scores of children are orphaned and abandoned, left to fend for themselves in a harsh and cruel world. Some are even left to die, like baby James, who's left to die after his mother passed away giving birth to him. Baby James was found crying in the jungle beside the deceased body of his mother, left to die with her. But thank God that Sister Bubit, the Adventist missionary teacher, rescued him and adopted him as her own. Now he's doing very well, deeply loved and cared for by a young woman who is a true world changer. Then there's the tragic and triumphant story of her sister Jillian. She was left as an orphan when her mother and father died, shortly after she was born, deep in the mountainous regions here in Palawan, totally inaccessible except for by foot. Her mother died from malaria, and her father died from cirrhosis of the liver. With no parents to care for her and protect her, she went from place to place, tragically exploited as a child slave here in the lowlands of Palawan. When she was around 8 years old, various people took her in, but for many of them, only used for slave labor. At times, she did have a roof over her head, but no bed to sleep in. She slept under the kitchen table with the dogs. She was only able to eat the scraps of food, the leftovers after everyone else had eaten. Many times she was left with nothing to eat. She was beaten, starved, abused. She had never experienced love from anyone. She had absolutely nothing, no one in this world. A precious little girl, all alone, struggling for survival and starving for love. But at age 10, she was found by Pastor Kent George, project director of Adventist Frontier Missions here in Palawan. He and his wife tried to care for her, but due to the trauma of her life, she acted out in rebellion. She couldn't be managed. Her rebellion was her way of protecting herself from further abuse. She was shown love, but refused to accept it. She was afraid to love back, she said, afraid to trust, afraid of being disappointed, afraid of being exploited all over again. But this godly couple did not give up. They continued showing her unconditional love. They did all that they could to show her that she is loved and that she is wanted. And finally, this great love broke through her hardened heart. She accepted their care and was finally adopted at age 11. She then became a U.S. citizen at age 16. She became a part of a family of missionaries. Now she belonged. She had purpose, direction, and most of all, love. She would literally not be alive if it wasn't for this godly couple and others. After getting married years later, Jillian chose to go back to the jungle villages where she came from, just like her sister Bubit, to serve as a missionary to her own people, in a place where no missionaries had been before. Now, she could have easily moved to the U.S. and escaped the hardships and the trauma of her homeland, but love compelled her to give her life in service, to minister, and to ease the burdens of her people. One day, a little baby girl, barely alive, was brought to her from the jungles. This little girl was only 1.5 years old, and yet she was only 8 pounds. She had no name, and she was born with club feet. And because of that deformity, she was unwanted by her parents. In fact, they wanted to kill her and discard her, but they were afraid of getting in trouble. So instead, the parents starved and beat her, hoping that she would eventually die on her own. When Giel found this baby could not move. The only thing that moved was her eyes that were full of terror at only 1.5 years old. I can't imagine what those eyes have seen. How could human beings do such horrific things to a weak, helpless infant? Tragically, this happens far more than we can imagine. In these regions, some children are even buried alive with their deceased mothers. Why? Because there's no one to care for them, no one to love them. When Giel took this no-name baby in her arms, she saw a reflection of herself. And Giel was determined that this child would live a life full of love. She adopted her and gave her the name Lani Hope. Lani in the Hawaiian language means heaven. So her name literally means heaven's hope. This little girl is now 5 years old, She's happy, healthy, full of love, always smiling. She has literally been rescued from the grave. She has experienced the hope that heaven offers, forever captured in her name. Thank God for world changers like Giel and her sister Bubit, who adopted baby James. Thank God for the Georges, who chose to come here and serve in the Philippines as missionaries. Pastor Kent said to me that if adopting Giel was the only thing he accomplished in life, that his life would have been worth it. So we're driving right now through the fields of Brooks Point here in South Palawan, following Pastor Kent. It's actually his two adopted daughters that we're doing the episode on today. But this episode is really special because I actually started this episode over a year, maybe almost 2 years ago now. My last flight with my dear friend Daniel Lui in the Yellow Bee. He was taking me to meet Sister Gillian on a Sabbath, and the weather was unfavorable. It was super cloudy. One of the main rules in helicopter flight is that you can never fly through clouds. So we were heading to the jungle school, but we weren't able to land. There was no way. So Daniel had to ascend. He had to fly higher than the highest cloud in the sky, way above the mountains, higher than the highest cloud on that day. We're looking down from heaven to earth, looking for a way, looking for an opportunity to get back to earth safely. But finally Daniel saw an opening in the clouds, and so he did a corkscrew, descending rapidly, safely but rapidly. Anyways, we made it to her sister Bubit's school. Right when the helicopter landed, all the clouds surrounded us and it started to rain and pour. But that was my last flight with Daniel. And we all know the story that Yellow Bee has been missing since March 1st, 2023, over a year now. And so that was my last flight in the Yellow Bee. We started filming, but we weren't able to finish the episode. But now I'm back here in South Palawan, the same property we filmed the episode. Now we're gonna finish it by God's grace. I'm thinking about Daniel the whole time. See you. Good to see you again. Hi. Hello, good to meet you. Good to meet you. I'm Taj, of course. Good to meet you. We were last time we were here. Last time I was here.
Okay.
It was on this property right there. This is buddy James right there. Say hi. Hi. Say aloha. You do this? Do the shaka?
Yeah?
I'm too tall to reach this.
You're too tall to reach it.
Did you give you a hug?
It's a meaningful trip to me to finally come back. You know, Daniel was the first one tried to make that connection with, you know, his labor, his work, his impact is still being felt and experienced even to this day. So
I am a volunteer teacher.
Volunteer teacher, awesome. Where?
A village called Marma.
Marma?
Mm-hmm. It's always been my dream to be a missionary.
Yeah.
And I didn't dream it with family. I dream it with, you know, just me and one of my friends. But, you know, God have a different plan.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
She had been through so many things that she couldn't trust anybody.
Mm.
And so, you know, she just grew up, our daughter, and we didn't tell her she had to become a missionary. We didn't do any, she was just part of our family.
Mm.
And you see what happens? Without saying
Beautiful.
anything, she becomes a missionary herself.
Yeah.
And she's a better missionary than I am. And
Yeah.
so I say, we're not missionaries, we're out here to find the rest of the family.
Mm.
That's what we're doing. And so, you know,
That's powerful.
it's just meaningful to say,
That's
how
what.
did this happen? We just lived our life.
Yeah. That's the cry of every human heart, like a place to belong. You know,
Exactly.
there's so many people that they feel out of place in this world, out of place in society, out of place even in their own family.
Exactly. And
They don't feel like they belong even there, you know. So like, it's more than what people need. Is far more than head knowledge or information. They need a place where they belong.
we adopted Giel, and this shows how the blessing goes on and on, because we adopted Giel, and so Giel in turn adopts Lonnie. So Lonnie is one of three babies that Giel has saved from death.
Oh wow!
So the interesting thing is that you think, well, how do you learn to love like that? Well, we found out that the more you give to somebody, the more of yourself you give, the more you love. It doesn't have anything to do with them giving anything to you. It's the more you give to them. I'm not talking about physical stuff. I'm talking about giving of yourself to them.
Yeah.
The more you love them.
And Lord, I know that someday I'm gonna leave this world behind. Oh, heaven sounding sweeter all the time. Seeing these little children and hearing of their horrific stories has left a deep impression on my soul. It has brought profound sadness to my heart, but at the same time, it has also brought profound lessons to my mind. It's estimated that more than 2 million children in the Philippines are orphans. Every day is a struggle for them to find food, clean water, clothing, and a safe place out of the elements of nature. These young, innocent children are forced to bypass their childhood and navigate the adult world. Many children have to work to support themselves and sometimes their surviving siblings, just barely scraping by to survive. With no one to guide and protect them, they often become the targets of exploiters and predators. These children aren't just lacking in physical necessities, they're also lacking in human connection, having someone to love and care, parent and protect them, somewhere to belong, and someplace to be accepted. One reason for the orphan crisis is natural disasters. The Philippines is located in the Ring of Fire and is often the subject of floods, typhoons, landslides, earthquakes, volcanoes, and droughts. It is one of the most exposed countries to natural disasters in the world. These natural disasters take their toll on the population, with hundreds and sometimes even thousands perishing in a single event. Another major reason for the orphan crisis is poverty. Millions of Filipinos are living below the poverty threshold, working hard every day and still not able to get ahead. Some of the poorest people are the indigenous landless laborers, fishermen, small farmers, mountain folk, and women. Violence, teen and preteen pregnancy, and other economic factors also play a huge role in the orphan crisis here in the Philippines. Many parents give up their children to orphanages in the hopes that they will have a better life. Then there are others who abandon their babies to die. The whole situation is heartbreaking. I don't have the words nor the stomach to describe the horrific things that have happened here to the most vulnerable in our world. Learning of this great need, I'm overwhelmed with emotion. So many children that need love, so many lives that are missing a family. But as I looked into the little faces, I saw pure joy and even contentment with even the smallest of things that we in the West take for granted. And so I appeal to you to never take your life for granted. Stop complaining about the trivial things of life. Remember that the most valuable thing you have is not money, but time. And never forget that there are billions of people who would be happy to trade their best days for your worst days. So please be sure to show gratitude, humility, deep respect for all humanity in every culture. And remember this, the reality is that we are all spiritual orphans, but God came to rescue us from the grave. We have been adopted into the family of God as children of the King of Kings. We belong to somebody. Even though we might be by ourselves, we are never alone. There is a faithful Father that has promised to provide for all the needs of His beloved children. And perhaps it is through you that God will respond to the call of all those hungry for love in both spiritual and tangible ways. You need not come to the Philippines to find the hunger of humanity. Just look around. Wherever you are on God's green earth, Ask God for spiritual discernment to know how you can be a blessing and lift the burden of someone today. How you can use your time and your talents and your treasure to relieve the sufferings of humanity. Maybe God is calling you to be a missionary, or maybe He's calling you to adopt or foster a child that's starving for love. Now, you may not be able to do that, but surely there is something you can do. Like spend time with that lonely child, or mentor that young impressionable teenager. Teach a young person an important life skill. Sponsor someone's education. Invest in building up your community. Volunteer your time to serve the needy. Speak a word of encouragement. Offer a prayer of intercession. Take time to listen to the isolated. Spread hope and peace and love in a world that is starving for these things. To sacrifice ourselves in the need of those around us. For it is in giving of ourselves, our lives, that we find the real and true meaning in life. You can be the reason someone finishes their education. You can be that person that shows a lonely soul what it's like to have a friend. You can be the reason that someone knows how to drive. You can be the reason that the stretch of highway gets cleaned up. You can be the reason that the elderly neighbor's flower garden gets weeded. You can be the reason that someone receives a heartfelt card or note in the mail. You can be the reason that someone smiles today. You can be the reason that someone has a relationship with Jesus. You can be the reason why someone else can actually have a second chance of life today. It's not about what we get. It's about what we can give. So give of yourself to a worthy need today. And in so doing, you're being the hands and feet of Jesus, the representatives of the love of God here on earth. And when our Lord returns, every sacrifice made, every prayer offered, every offering given will be worth it all. When we see those whom we have ministered to in heaven forever, what greater reward is there than that? This is what it means to be a world changer and a destiny transformer. So what are you waiting for? Go and change your world today.